What you got? All right, men, over the top. I just wanted to take a little bit of time, talk to you about World War I, show you some of the things that I have that I definitely can't show you on a normal school day. So, first of all, on my list here is the new technology of World War I. So, first off, most soldiers get something similar to this. Not exactly this. This is the Mosin Nagant. This is a Russian rifle, but the American version, British version, very similar rifles in their construction. So, bolt action rifles instead of, you go back to the 1870s, 1880s, we're still mostly using our muzzle loading guns. Obviously, this isn't the most advanced thing on the field, though. We have grenades. We have gas attacks. Because of those gas attacks, people have to wear gas masks. This is what does away with this right here, facial hair. Most people go clean shaven, or at the very least, some of those small, funky mustaches you might have seen, such as Hitler. So, as far as new technology, we have machine guns on the battlefield, not for the first time. They're used all over Africa prior to World War I. But this is the first time where two opposing armies in great numbers are using them against each other. And this forces people into the trenches like you just saw there. People are taking defensive positions, but we're still using ancient tactics of war from before this new technology was invented. And people die by the thousands because of it. They do exactly what you just saw me do there. We climb out of the trenches, we rush the other side, and we try to capture their trench before we are mowed down by gunfire. Behind me you see a nice clear open field, but that's not what you would see if you're on a World War I battlefield. What you would see are craters. You would see dead bodies, and you would see barbed wire stretched across, obstacles for you to completely be caught on so that the opposing side have a chance to kill you. The realities of World War I and the conflict and the combat it involved were something that the world hadn't seen yet. Explosives like the world hadn't seen yet. Shell shock becomes a thing. Troops are completely psychologically ruined by the constant shelling of their trenches. You can hear the shells come down and you don't know where they'll land. You're always concerned that maybe it's going to be mine this time. Maybe this is the one with my name on it. So after the new technology, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the end of some of these empires. This is a world war. It involved obviously many different countries throughout the world. And the reason it was a world war is because of what we just talked about in our last section, which is imperialism. We have a few countries who control a large, vast majority of other nations. And so that is how so many nations got dragged into this world war. So we have the Ottoman Empire, we have the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and of course Russia also goes under its own chain. So the Ottoman Empire used to be one of the grandest empires on earth. By the time we got around to World War I, they were no longer. By the end of World War I, they didn't exist anymore. They were gone. You've never heard of the Ottoman Empire probably before this class, specifically because of that. The closest comparison today would be Turkey. Turkey still carries on some of the traditions of the Ottoman Empire, but they are not the same thing. Then we have Austria-Hungary, which is also dismantled, split up into several different countries, some of which you know today. And Germany loses its entire empire. Obviously, Germany stays somewhat intact. We'll get to that in a little bit. And Russia goes through a major revolution, the one that turns it communist as we know it today. So this was a major war in terms of how it affected the world that we now live in. Next up, we have the Russian revolutions, as I just kind of hinted to. And we have the February Revolution and then the October Revolution. People in Russia are very fed up with the war itself and how it's going and the amount of people who are dying, and they want out of the war, and so they go to Tsar Nicholas and they tell him this, and he does not listen, and this leads to revolution. He's overthrown in February, but ultimately those new leaders don't take them out of the war either, so they have a second revolution in October which is the communist revolution in Russia that leads to the world that we know today. Then we have the Armenian genocide, the first genocide of the 20th century. The Armenians are a Christian group that are living in the Ottoman Empire at the time, again, modern day Turkey and other countries. And they are like I said, a minority, and the Ottomans do not like them. They don't want them to gain power after the war. They think that they are a natural group for some of the allies to choose to give more power to after the war. And that's one of the things that spurs on a massive genocide of these people. There are about 2 million 2 million Armenian Christians living in the Ottoman Empire at the time. 1.5 million of those died during the Armenian genocide. Horrible, horrible event. After that, we have how America got involved in this war. So America, initially, we stay neutral. We stay out of the war until the very end of the war. We actually don't do nearly as much fighting compared to some of the other countries because we get there so late. Our road to the war is very complex. It involves things like the Germans attacking some of our ships. Well, not our ships, but ships with people from America on them, such as the Lusitania. And it also... people tend to blame that only, though, and it's a lot more than that. It's a growing number of things. It's the amount of money that we're lending to the British and not lending to the Germans because the British have a blockade on Germany. And the last straw, kind of in all this, is the Zimmerman Note. In the Zimmerman Note, Germany asks Mexico to start a war with America to reclaim some of the territory that we've gained from Mexico over the years, and that Germany would help them in this effort after they've won the war. The hope, of course, is to keep America out of the war. Well, we intercept this note, and that sets us up to take over, to get involved in this war. Sorry. Total war. As far as the amount of people who are involved in this isn't just soldiers. This is everybody. Everybody is rationing things. Everybody is doing their part. We have meatless mud days and things like that to try to save up as much as we can for the war effort. Women go without brassieres, which saves enough metal to create an entire battleship on its own. Many different efforts just like that can help in the war effort. Let's see, we have the Spanish flu, which is very, very relevant today. As the name suggests, it is actually not from Spain, believe it or not. The reason it's called the Spanish flu is because the Spanish were not involved in the war, and so they weren't suppressing the information about the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu actually, we believe, started in America and spread all over the world, and it killed people by the millions. Not completely comparable to the COVID situation that we're dealing with today, but there are some important lessons that we can learn from the Spanish flu. For example, 2 cities, St. Louis and Philadelphia, I believe. If we get this chart up, I will put it right up to the camera so you guys can see this for yourself. Philadelphia and St. Louis, 2 different cities that had very different responses to the Spanish flu. So Philadelphia, you can see there, they had a major celebration right around the time of the outbreak of the Spanish flu. And thousands of people gathered together, and they had a massive, massive spike in their cases of the Spanish flu. But we have St. Louis, on the other hand. They took it upon themselves to tell people to quarantine, give people the proper warnings, and they took many more precautions, such as the ones we're taking today, like closing schools and things like that. And St. Louis had a much better time of it. Still, many people got the Spanish flu, but it was at such a slow rate that things like hospitals and stuff aren't overrun, so we can deal with it better. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here today. So please, if you already are, thank you for doing such a good job in self-quarantine. And if you are not, please consider doing that. So to continue on after the Spanish flu, we have the end of the war. So the total death count for soldiers, 8.5 million soldiers died during the war. There are 21 million soldiers who are wounded, but 17 million people died. Most of them because of the Spanish flu, or more accurately, H1N1, which is what we know it is today, which is still a very dangerous strain of flu today. Finally, we have Wilson's 14 points. I'm not going to bore you with all of them, but 2 in particular. 1, to keep open seas for trading. This was very important to America because many saw this as a big part of how we got involved in the war in the first place, because Britain was preventing us from trading with Germany, and Germany was sinking many of the the ships that we were trading with England. And the second of the 14 points that I do kind of want to go over is the desire for a League of Nations, kind of like the UN today. The UN is a newer iteration of the same kind of idea. The idea is we get all nations together, and the hope is that it prevents another great war like World War I. So obviously you can guess that the League of Nations was not very successful in its goal. Much of that having to do with the fact that it didn't have the same powers that the modern UN does, and also the fact that even though the US came up with the idea for creating it, we did not join it. Lastly, the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles is often blamed as very, very important to the beginning of World War II. It was very punitive against the Germans. There were reparations set in the Treaty of Versailles that had a great effect on the German economy. And not to mention, after World War II, of course, we have the worldwide Great Depression, which also affected them economically very much so. And finally, we have the breakup of the German nation, not just its empire, but also the Rhineland going back to France, which is a territory that they've argued over for centuries, and that gets sent back to France, and that's a problem for them. And also other bits of territory here and there that Germany loses from its empire, even within Europe itself. And the anger over this Treaty of Versailles is often cited as one of the biggest causes of World War II. This is one of the ways that Hitler gets people to support him and his ideas, is talking about how he's going to undo some of the horrible things that are done in the Treaty of Versailles. So, if you made it this far, thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, please social distance yourselves and try to limit your contacts so we don't have another Spanish flu like epidemic.
Hey, I'm just going to add this on to the end of the video. I just wanted to show you a few things that I didn't show you in that video and say a few things. So, first up, these guys right here. These were in my pocket, and I was setting a terrible, terrible example for you all by not having these on my face. You never know what could happen if you are in a hunting family or if your family shoots for sport. Make sure you are wearing ear and eye protection. I had my ear protection in. I did not have my eye protection on, and that is setting a horrible example for you. Please be safe. Now, this I did not show you. This is a clip. When you hear of a clip, this is what that actually refers to. Many people call these clips. This is a magazine. So, a clip-fed gun, this goes in the top of your rifle, and you push down on the rounds and send them down into the fixed magazine in the gun, and the clip goes away. Sometimes it is ejected automatically by the gun, sometimes you have to physically pull it out. So a few other things, let's see, we have 2 sidearms. You might have seen this one in the video earlier. And so we have a Model 10 from Smith & Wesson and a 1911. Model 1911. So, this would go on to serve in both World Wars in great capacity, but actually every single gun that you saw today would serve in both World Wars, including the Model 10 and the Mosin Nagant from earlier, which, although kind of outdated, the Russians still pressed into service as their primary arm for their soldiers. And I'm going to add on just a few bloopers on the end of this, just so you guys can have something to laugh at while you're stuck at home.
All right, boys, time for the morning hate. Give me what you got.
Don't like
The fixed bayonets.
You don't want to get dirt in your bayonet. That's gonna give you a bad time. It's already gritty enough.
And your head's way up there. It's a big target.
Maybe I just leave the bayonet on.
Hey, one last quick message here at the end. Since I was handling some firearms in this video, I do want to take a second with you to talk about firearm safety. So rule number 1 is you need to treat every single gun as if it is loaded at all times. You need to be vigilant and you need to be very, very careful with firearms. If you see a firearm, you need to not touch that firearm. It could be loaded. These are tools, yes, but they are deadly tools. You need to be very cautious around them. You need to make sure that you are not pointing the gun at anything you are not willing to destroy. Obviously in the video you see my hand go in front of the muzzle for the bayonet, but I assure you, between the takes, we are taking every precaution, making sure that the gun is not loaded and nothing is in the chamber during those times. Next, you need to keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target, until your sights are on target, so that nothing could be damaged that you don't want to be damaged. Lastly, you need to make sure of your target and what's beyond it. That's very important. Knowing where those things may go, and have as good of a time as you can have with this crazy time that we're in right now. Have a good one.